How does that saying go? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to convince people he didn't exist, right? I think the same thing has been done with mind control as a concept. There's been an expansive campaign to try and make everyone think that all that stuff is impossible, it's not real, it's science fiction, it's fantasy, hypnosis doesn't really work, neurolinguistic programming has supposedly been scientifically debunked. Subliminals don't really work either, even though they've spent decades upon decades refining and using that technology.
Ladies and gentlemen, this commercial is going to use subliminal advertising. Subliminal advertising.
But no, supposedly none of that stuff is real, right? And it's interesting because if you believe that, then it's much easier for the people who know how your brain works to use that information against you.
This isn't real. What is real? How do you define real?
And as the Orwellian destruction of language unfolds all around us, we're seeing the very much intended consequences of the ever-increasing power of words. You know what, let's step back for a second. Have you ever seen this clip of Al Roker? Watch what happens in this clip to Al Roker when this woman says the phrase, Holy Ghost.
That's exactly how you have to have a certain amount of distance between the bodies
exactly.
in your high.
Yes, like they say in Catholic school, leave room for the Holy Ghost. Anyway, there is a lot of memories today, actually. It's a big day in music.
The man just shuts down like a robot or a Manchurian candidate. Tell me that's not programming. I mean, the guy's not faking it. What the hell is that? She says the phrase, and he just completely right? It seems to me that same technology, which was figured out, by the way, decades ago under unethical Cold War mind control research programs, expansive ones, of which the CIA's MK Ultra was actually only a small fragment globally, but that's another story for another time, is being turned upon the masses. And now what's really being pushed is this concept of trigger words. This did not used to be a concept that was widely publicly discussed. And now everyone's talking about, she's triggered, he's been triggered, it's a trigger. My 8-year-old is using this phrase now because he heard someone else use it on the internet. Do you see what I'm saying? So now we're really being inundated with the concept of triggering. Well, let's see what Google says about the word trigger and what it means, since that's where millions upon millions of people get their information from. So let's see what Google says the word trigger means. And you can clearly see straight away that as a noun, trigger has one definition. It's a device that releases a spring or catch that sets off a mechanism, especially in order to fire a gun. Trigger, a noun. But then you have trigger as a verb, which is to cause an event or situation to happen, to cause a device to function, to precipitate, to provoke, to activate. They're activating something. And then look at this last definition, which is the longest one on here. Especially if something read, seen, or heard distress someone, typically as a result of arousing feelings or memories associated with a particular traumatic experience. Quote, she started crying and told me that my news had really triggered her. Don't you think that's interesting, though, that it's not only that trigger's a verb, but they specifically, the longest explanation, the longest definition has to do with how news is an example of how to trigger someone. Do you see that? Now let's take a look at my dictionary from 1941 and look up the word trigger. Oh, look, it's a noun. It was not a verb at that time. There's no verb form of the word trigger in this book. Meanwhile, can it really be a coincidence that the same year you had stuff like this coming out is the same year you have it listed that the word trigger started being used in this specific way as a verb to denote the initiation of something or having something be provoked. I'm sure many of you guys noticed that after the switch to digital, specifically after the switch to digital, meaning it's no longer analog television, they can now layer as many signals into the digital signal as they want to, and there's no interference on your screen to let you know what all is being transmitted when they do that.
Just moments away from changing our whole world from analog to digital here, and it's so exciting.
Suddenly you had every major news outlet using these fast spinning globes and circular graphics that are moving very fast, spinning, and a lot of times they count down the viewing audience into the broadcast. It's almost as if they're counting people down into a hypnotic trance with the combination of the flicker rate and these very intricate spinning circular and spherical graphics. And I'm just going to show you a few examples of that. I'm going to slow them all down by 50% so that I'm not just showing you 10 of these in a row and it has some creepy effect on your brain. I just want you to recognize this and see it for what it actually is here. So you have that, especially after 2008, 2009, when they made the big switch. Now that's become the standard. That's just the standard graphics on any mainstream news show that you see anywhere. It's not a coincidence. And then now that that has been perfected and they've been using that for a while, now all of a sudden, oddly enough, they're finally starting to admit in the mainstream that hypnosis isn't just some wacky, debunked pseudoscience, but that it actually does work and affect your brain. And this is just one article that's an example of that in Forbes, where they're talking about research shows hypnosis has interesting effects on the brain. There's a lot of controversy about the validity of hypnosis. That's all on purpose. It's been on purpose since they figured it out. Why would they tell everyone how this works and validate it if they hadn't perfected it yet? Anyways, you come down in here and it talks about, does hypnotism affect brain activity? There have been several studies that have shown effects on brain activity after hypnotism. Mendelsohn et al. Studied this through giving people post-hypnotic amnesia. This basically means the hypnotist told people to forget a certain thing after they're hypnotized until they hear a recall trigger word which lets them remember it again. Trigger words. The key place where you will see that phrase up until recently has always been in hypnosis or Manchurian candidates, things like that. Brainwashing, mind control. And now they're really pushing the concept of trigger words on everybody. It's, to me, not a coincidence at all. It really is as if there are people who, they count them down into this trance on the television, they impart the information.
We're counting down to one of President Obama's most important speeches of the year. We're counting down.
Right? And then spin them back out at the end of the show. And it's like mass hypnosis. You remember the phrase from school, probably, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Now they actually want to invert that. They want you to believe that words are some of the most horrible things in the world that can hurt you the most.
Words matter. As parents and individuals, let's create a zero-tolerance zone where offensive words are simply not acceptable. It's not about being politically correct or hypersensitive. It's about doing the right thing.
They are really inundating us with this idea of verbal triggers. They want you to believe and know and hear about how people are triggered, how you could be triggered, your friends could be triggered. Like spells, like a witch casting a spell, like a little programmed biological android.
And his name is Mr. Machine.
Just responding to stimuli with emotional outbursts. No logic, no critical thought, nothing like that.
What a great honor to be able to introduce for the first time ever.
Tell me this isn't mass mind control, because it really seems like mass mind control. We're seeing this everywhere right now. And one place we're seeing this indoctrination really heavy all across the country is college campuses.
Trigger warnings really facilitate the best education, and they're something that is a necessity on college campuses for a lot of students.
It's not just with the SJW millennials who seem keen to attack their own free speech because someone else's free speech might hurt their feelings. So they're just going to attack free speech, which is actually attacking their own free speech.
Who gets to decide what's offensive? Who gets to decide, guys?
How about
What if everybody says, I am hurt? Does that mean everyone else has to stop speaking?
Which is creepy in its own right, but it's not just them. There are people in every walk of life and group who are right now getting really, really upset by words.
There's a very thick line between being politically incorrect and being racist, and words matter.
You're talking about psychological control of people's minds. It's like the Matrix when Morpheus says they want to take a human being and turn it into this. But actually what it's doing is it's turning people into Al Roker. Because they're taking someone's reality and like programming a bull to react as if he's seen red when it's not really there. That's the amount of psychological control words now have over large portions of people.
If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
If people are now being engineered to instantly react to certain words, concepts, phrases, things they disagree with, from a place of a hair trigger emotional response to a stimulus that seems to just completely override and bypass all ability for critical thought, and then beyond that to not only question the construct, but question what's going on 2 inches in front of their own face, then how is that not mind control?